The door to the drawing room slowly opened. The well-oiled door should have opened smoothly, but now it moved slowly, heavily, as if against a wall of pressure. At that speed, it might well have been reading Sebas' mind. If the door really knew what he was thinking, he would have rather it didn't open at all. But it did indeed give way to reveal the drawing room. The parlor was the same as always, but the four grotesques waiting for him inside were not. One looked like a light blue samurai. His chilly aura was deactivated, and he was at attention, silver halberd in hand. Another was a demon. What inner thoughts did his sarcastic expression hide? And in the demon's arms was an angel. It resembled a fetus with wings like withered branches. Lastly, I humbly apologize for my lateness. Keeping his voice steady by sheer power of will, Sebas directed an almost religious bow at the soul-seated being in the room. As both house steward and butler, Sebas held one of the highest positions among his peers. But the being that both frightened and awed him was none other than one of the absolutes, the 41 supreme beings. Aintz Ul Gaun. He was the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick, with the greatest power at his disposal. The staff of Aintz Ul Gaun in his hand was giving off a black aura. Hazy red lights glowed in his vacant orbits. The gaze slid up and down over Sebas, taking him in. He could feel it despite his lowered head. The vibrations in the air told him that Aintz, finding this tiresome, had waved his hand dramatically. "It's fine. Don't worry about it, Sebas. That's what I get for coming with no notice. More importantly, standing over there bowing doesn't get us anywhere. Get in here." "My lord," Sebas raised his head in response to the dignified voice and slowly stepped forward, and a chill went up his spine. With his keen senses, he was detecting skillfully concealed hostility and murderous intent. He slowly shifted his gaze. The two guardians in his field of vision didn't appear to be paying any special attention to Sebas, or so it might seem to the common observer. Sebas realized it well enough. There was nothing amicable about the tension around them. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Their vigilance was not generally found when they were with allies. Sebas understood their caution, and the pressure made him wonder if everyone in the room could hear his violently pounding heart. "I think you should stop right there." Demiurge's cool voice halted Sebas in his tracks. The spot Demiurge indicated was slightly removed from their master. Of course, it wasn't so far away as to make conversing difficult. It would serve as an appropriate distance for an audience with a superior, on the whole. But normally, Aintz would have said he was too far away and asked him to approach. His silence created a sense of distance wider than the physical space, and that weighed heavily on Sebas. It was also the optimum range for Cocytus to attack, which made him even more anxious. Incidentally, Solution had entered the room along with Sebas, but she remained right next to the door. Now then Aintz cracked his knuckles, though it was unclear how he managed with nothing but bones for fingers. "First I'll ask you if I need to explain why I've come. There could be only one reason. The circumstances alone said as much. No, that won't be necessary. Then I'd like to hear it straight from you, Sebas. I didn't receive a report, but apparently you recently picked up a cute little pet. Is that right? I knew it." Sebas felt like an icicle had impaled him in the back. He immediately realized he hadn't replied to his master and hurried to raise his voice. "Yes, my lord, your response was delayed. Sebas, I'll ask you again. Is it true you've picked up and are caring for a cute little pet?" "Yes, I am." "Good, then I'll ask you this. Why didn't you report it?" Right, Sebas' shoulders trembled slightly and he stared at the floor. "What do I say to avoid the worst?" Sebas stood there in silence, and Aintz, watching him, slowly leaned back in his chair. The abnormally loud creak filled the room. "What's wrong, Sebas? You seem to be sweating bullets. If you need a handkerchief, I'll lend you one." Aintz theatrically drew a snow-white handkerchief from somewhere. He held it between his pointer and middle fingers. He casually tossed it in Sebas' direction. The handkerchief fluttered over the desk and down to the floor with a graceful motion. "You have my permission to use it." "Thank you, my lord." Sebas took a single step toward Aintz and retrieved the fallen handkerchief. Then he hesitated. "It doesn't have your pet's blood on it or anything. I just can't stand to look at you with all that sweat. Oh, apologies for my unsightly appearance." Sebas unfolded the handkerchief and wiped the greasy moisture off his forehead. The cloth absorbed more than he expected and turned dark. "Now then, Sebas, when I dispatched you to the royal capital, I ordered you to take note of anything and everything. Then send those observations to Nazarick. I did so because it's hard to discern the valuable information from the garbage without more input. And in the documents you sent, you even wrote up things as minor as street rumors, correct? Yes, that's correct. Then Demiurge, just to confirm, let us hear from you as well. I had you read the documents Sebas sent too, right? Did he mention anything about his little pet? No, Lord Aints. I read them over several times, but I could not find the slightest hint of such a thing. I see. So again, Sebas, I'll ask with that in mind. Why didn't you report it? I want to know why you ignored my orders. Were the words of Aints Ulgau not worthy enough to bind you? The question rocked the room. Sebas answered in a desperate rush. Of course they were, my lord. I simply did not think the matter merited a report to you. Silence fell. It felt to Sebas like four bloodthirsty gazes were boring into him. They came from Cocytus, Demiurge, the angel in Demiurge's arms, and Solution. Solution would undoubtedly attack him with a single word from their master. Sebas didn't fear death per se. Sacrificing himself for Nazarick would be his greatest joy, but the idea of dying a traitor's death made even the thick-skinned butler shudder. As a creation of one of the 41 supreme beings, he knew there was no greater humiliation than to be executed for treason. After a pause long enough to leave Sebas's forehead covered in sweat, Ain't spoke. So you're saying it was a silly decision on your part? Yes, just as you say, Lord Aints. Please forgive my foolish error, I see. I understand. Sebas heard Aints' voice, devoid of emotion, while his head was still lowered in apology. Since he hadn't been immediately disposed of, the mood had lightened, if only slightly. But Sebas couldn't relax because before he could, Aints said something that made his heart leap into his throat. Solution, bring Sebas's pet here. Understood. Solution left and the door closed quietly. Sebas's sharp faculties sensed her receding on the other side. He swallowed hard. There were four grotesques present: Aints, Cocytus, Demiurge, and the strange angel. Demiurge didn't look much like a grotesque being, but with the other three, their nature was clear at a glance. Are they not concealing their forms because it won't be a problem if she sees them? If a member of the great tomb of Nazarick chose to silence someone, it was always with death. I should have let her go sooner. Sebas mentally shook his head. It was too late for such thoughts now. Before long, Sebas detected two presences approaching the room. What should I do? He shifted his focus and stared into space. If she entered the room, he would have to make a decision, and there was only one option. He looked to Demiurge, who continued to observe him, and then to Aints. His gaze dropped helplessly to the floor. A knock sounded at the door, then it opened. Unsurprisingly, two women appeared, Solution and Suya. This is her. Though he wasn't facing her, Sebas could hear her breath catch slightly at the entrance. Was she taken aback by Demiurge's appearance? It was as if he was the devil incarnate. Had she shuddered in horror at the giant light blue insect Cocytus? Was she frightened by the disturbing infantile angel? Or was she awestruck by Aints, who embodied death? Perhaps she felt all those things at once. The Guardian's displeasure increased with the human-s appearance. Suya was a physical symbol of Sebas's crime, in a way. She trembled under the enmity directed toward her. The animosity of the absolutes of this world, the Nazarick Guardians, terrified all manner of weaker beings. It was a wonder she didn't burst into tears. Sebas didn't turn around, but he could still sense Suya's eyes on his back. In other words, her courage stemmed from his presence. Demiurge, Cocytus, knock it off. Follow victim's example, Aints said quietly. The room's atmosphere changed. Well, the only difference was the disappearance of the rancor directed at Suya. After reproving the two guardians, Aints slowly held out his left hand in her direction. Then he turned his palm to the ceiling and unhurriedly waved her closer. Come in, Suya, Sebas's human pet. As if his words compelled her, she took one trembling step, then another into the room. You must have courage if you are not running away. Or did Solution tell you that Sebas's fate depends on you? Suya, shaking, didn't answer. Sebas felt the gaze on his back intensifying. It conveyed her thoughts louder than words could. Now that she was in the room, Suya unhesitatingly moved next to Sebas. Cocytus slowly went to stand behind her. She grabbed the hem of Sebas's jacket. He suddenly remembered when she grabbed the cuff of his pants in that alley. At the same time, he was filled with regret. If he had only acted more intelligently, none of this would have happened. Demiurge looked coldly at Suya. Near finger snapped. Demiurge promptly heeded his master's will and snapped his mouth shut. It's fine. It's fine, Demiurge. I'll praise her courage for not fleeing before me and forgive her rudeness. My mistake, my lord. Aints nodded benevolently in response to the apology. The chair creaked as he leaned against the back. First, I'll tell you my name. I am Aints Ulgaun Sebas S. Master. That was correct. Aints Ulgaun, one of the 41 supreme beings, held absolute power over Sebas, including whether he lived or died. To hear such a thing from one unconditional ruler was the greatest joy. But for some reason, Sebas didn't feel the gladness he usually expected. In fact, he experienced so little joy that he shivered in alarm. It wasn't due to Tsuya's presence. But just that moment, he'd practically forgotten she was there. Something else was bothering him. The conversation continued while these things whirled through Sebas' mind. Oh, I never mind, Tsuya. I know about you to some degree, and I am not interested in you beyond that. You can just keep quiet and stand there. You'll know why I called you in a little while. Oh, okay. Now then, the red lights in his vacant eye sockets shifted. Sebas, I'd like to ask you something. I told you to operate without drawing attention to yourself, did I not? You did, my lord, but instead you invited trouble for the sake of this worthless woman. Am I wrong? Tsuya flinched at the word worthless, but Sebas answered without reacting. You are not, my lord. You didn't consider that to be ignoring my orders. I deeply regret that my indiscretion has invited your displeasure, Lord Aints. I'll take sufficient care that this never happens again. Very well, I said very well. Aints changed posture and the chair groaned again. Everyone makes mistakes. Sebas, I forgive your silly error. I humbly thank you, Lord Aints. However, mistakes must be paid for. With death, go on. The tension in the room thickened, and the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. No, that wasn't true. Sebas was the only one affected. The other members of Nazarick were fine. Sebas gulped. Who was he supposed to kill? He didn't have to ask. Still, though he already knew, a longing to be wrong pushed him to pose a question despite his mouth's unwillingness to move. Beg your pardon, my lord. I mean that if you eliminate the root of your error, we can say that you never made it in the first place. If the cause of your error remains, it'll set a difficult precedent for the others. Don't you think? You Nazarick's butler, you supposed to be in charge. We can very well leave things like this. Sebas exhaled. Then he took another gulp of air. Sebas' breathing was always steady, even before a powerful enemy, but he was now gasping like a small animal facing a predator. Sebas, are you a dog who obeys the 41 supreme beings, or do you abide by your own will? You don't need to answer, show me. Sebas closed his eyes for a moment before opening them again. He hesitated for an instant. No, for an eternity that others might call an instant. The pause was long enough for Cocytus, Demiurge, and Solution fanatic devotees of the supreme beings to show their displeasure. Then, finally, he made up his mind. Sebas was Nazarick's butler, nothing more. It was his foolish indecision that had led to this. If he had sought permission sooner, this wouldn't have happened. Everything had been his fault. A hard glint appeared in Sebas' eyes, the sparkle of steel. Then he turned to face Tsuya. The fingers clinging to him retreated. They faltered briefly in the air and then dropped helplessly. She must have seen his face and understood his decision. Her eyes closed as she smiled. Tsuya's expression showed neither despair nor fear. She acknowledged and accepted what was about to happen. It was the face of a martyr. Sebas' movements were also calm. His heart was already at ease. Standing, there was a servant with ironclad devotion to Nazarick. There was no reason for a loyal retainer to not follow his master's absolute order. He had cast aside his hesitation. All that remained was earnest devotion. Sebas' tightly balled fist flew at Tsuya's head at a speed that ensured a mercifully instant death. And then something hard stopped it. What do you mean by interfering? NGH. Sebas' punch, about to obliterate Tsuya's head, had been blocked. Cocytus had reached out from behind Tsuya, whose eyes were still squeezed shut, to stop the fist. If he's blocking a strike ordered by a supreme being, does that mean he's revolting? But the question in Sebas' mind was resolved immediately. Step back, Sebas. Though he was irritated and confused, he had been about to throw another punch, right up until he heard Aints. His fist relaxed completely. It wasn't a rebuke to Cocytus, but an order holding Sebas back. The plan all along had been for Cocytus to block the attack. The whole thing had been a setup. In short, they'd done it to test Sebas' will. Tsuya cracked her eyes open and realized she'd narrowly avoided the guillotine. Once the threat to her life had receded, the tension snapped, and she trembled with tears in her eyes. Her legs were shuddering so violently she seemed likely to fall, but Sebas didn't move to support her. Or rather, he couldn't. What could he do now? He had completely forsaken her. Ignoring Tsuya's fear, Aints and Cocytus began a discussion. Cocytus, would that attack have killed the woman for sure? No doubt. That strike meant instant death. Then I hereby judge Sebas' loyalty to be sound. Good work, Sebas, my lord. With a hard expression on his face, Sebas bowed his head. Demiurge, any objections? None, my lord. Cocytus? None, my lord. Victim, peach, clay, scarlet, grape, brown, ash. None, my lord. Okay, then on to the next item of discussion. With a snap of his fingers, Aints stood and spread his arm to the side. His robe billowed. Thanks to Sebas and Solution S work, we've gathered enough intelligence. There's no reason to stay here any longer. Effective immediately, I'll have you vacate the mansion and return to Nazarick. Sebas, you're responsible for the woman's fate. I'd like to say you can do as you please, since we've proven your loyalty. But we need to think things over before releasing her. Don't you agree there will be trouble if she goes around blabbing about Nazarick, Demiurge? Indeed I do. As long as we face an unknown enemy, we should avoid information leaks whenever possible. So what should we do? Perhaps we should check on some things. Right. Sebas, wait a little while on disposing of Tsuya. I don't think you'll have to kill her, but I can say for sure. Sebas couldn't hide his surprise that even Aints, Nazarick's ultimate authority, couldn't decide immediately, and was leaving the issue of what to do with Tsuya unsettled. Lord Aints, are we withdrawing from this mansion from the royal capital due to my mistake? Sort of, but not really. As I mentioned before, I think we've gotten nearly all the intel we need from this place. There's not much benefit to staying entrenched here any longer. I figured it's safer to withdraw. Demiurge, I'll take Victim back. Give them here. Having taken the baby angel from Demiurge, Aints cast a spell. Greater teleportation. At the same moment, he flourished his cape dramatically, like a stage actor. Then, in a ball of raven black collapsing in on itself, he vanished. Sebas was briefly stunned by the strangely theatrical departure, the likes of which he hadn't seen before, but he came back to himself with a start. Well, she seems a bit tired, so I think I'll let her rest in her room for a little while. There's no issue with my escorting her there, right, Demiurge? No. It's as you say, Sebas. Demiurge smiled demonically and gestured elegantly toward the door, as if to say, go ahead. Just keep in mind that you could be summoned again. I don't think you need to worry, but I don't want to have to go chasing you around the capital. Come with me. Okay, Tsuya replied in a hoarse voice, tottering after Sebas. They left the room, and two sets of footsteps tapped down the hall. They walked without speaking, and eventually the door to Tsuya's room came into view. They hadn't gone very far, but it felt like they'd been traveling for a terribly long time. When they reached the door, Sebas finally seemed to have made up his mind to speak. I don't intend on apologizing. He sensed a flinch behind him. But it is my fault that I was ordered to dispose of you. If I had handled things differently, this wouldn't have happened. Master Sebas, I am a loyal slave to Lord Aints and the 41 Supreme Beings. If the same thing happened again, I am sure I would act no differently. So I think you should go be happy in the human world. I'll request permission for you. Lord Aints should be able to manipulate your memories. We'll erase all the bad ones and then you can go. What about you? I'll have him erase mine too. Nothing good can come of remembering this. What would be good? Sensing the intense will behind her words, Sebas turned around. He was met with the sight of a woman glaring at him through her tears. Slightly shaken, he considered what he could say to persuade her. Certainly, Nazarick was an exceptionally wonderful place, truly blessed by the gods. But that held true for only Sebas and the others created by the 41 Supreme Beings, along with the lower minions of the Great Tomb. To an ordinary human with no aptitude or powers, such a place could never be a home, and he didn't think it would accept Tsuya, a weakling with a nearly worthless life. No, it wouldn't be possible without the protection of Nazarick's Supreme Master. I am saying you should go be happy in the human world. My happiness is where you are, Master Sebas, so please take me with you. Tsuya stated her wishes clearly, and Sebas pitied her. You seem to have experienced some happiness from this minor sequence of events, but it's only because your heart is numb from the hell you endured. She had seen the worst the world had to offer, so she thought she could live a pleasant life in this problematic place. There was only a small step up, that was all. That's what Sebas had decided, but Suya laughed. I don't think this is hell at all. I get to eat until I am full, and you give me honest work to do. I was born and grew up in a tiny village. Life there was hard too. Suya's eyes focused on something far away for just a moment. She returned to herself immediately and looked straight at Sebas. We worked the fields while racked with hunger, and then the lord of the domain took most of the harvest anyway. There was barely anything left to fill our stomachs, and on top of that, the lord treated us like toys. He deraped me and laughed when I screamed. He laughed. I understand. Suya was smiling weakly when he pulled her in close, folded her into his breast, and put his arms around her trembling shoulders. Just like before, she cried like a dam had broken, and he felt her tears soaking into his shirt. The world she had seen and lived in couldn't possibly be all there was.